are meeting this man who, even now, he walks by faith and not by sight, because you're constantly doing new things. You're challenging us into new adventures. You're putting us to the test by making us wait sometimes, but you are moving powerfully through this man. I ask you now to come by your Holy Spirit, anoint him, fill him, and Lord, open our hearts. This is not church as usual. This is about you, about speaking to us personally, which is what you're able to do by your Spirit. So God, anoint this man. Manifest your presence here. Come, Holy Spirit, and talk to us and empower us for your purposes in Jesus' name. And all God's people said,
Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Andrew.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me back, Jack. It's risky business, man, letting me here. How are you guys doing? You guys doing all right? All right. How many of you guys were here last time I spoke, just so I know I'm not being too redundant? Well, baby, you don't count. I mean, she's heard all my messages. All right, so this is one of those messages I do where it's kind of like a love-hate relationship with it. Some people love it, some people hate it, but I still think it's an important message just because in the Christian circles there's something that we deal with that's often almost ignored or dismissed. And I just want to address it just because I think churches that address it become some of the healthiest churches that I've ever seen. And so I'm going to go there with that. Is that something you guys are okay with? And if you don't like it, it's 100% okay. You guys don't have to agree with me. You guys don't even have to like me. It's completely okay. I just want to open up a dialogue. I just want to open up a conversation. Even if you don't like it, the fact that you guys have a conversation about it means something. So at least let it be a conversation. And if I trip, it's because I ripped my shoe coming out. So don't laugh too hard. And it's my favorite shoes. So I may cry as well. All right. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of background for those of you guys who don't know my background. I'm bullet pointing it really fast, and I just want to ask a question after I go through this. So I personally came out of organized crime. Before I even came out of organized crime, I was born in the Islamic Republic of Iran. We lived there as a rich family. We escaped. We went to Pakistan. We literally escaped, fled on foot across the desert, climbed a mountain, went to live in Pakistan as refugees, and from there we came to America as religious refugees. As we lived here for several years, by the time I was a teenager, I started dabbling in the criminal world. It was pathetic criminal world. It was very, very small time. But about 10 years later, I was running a multi-million, nearly $200 million a year organization that was completely criminal. We were moving a metric ton of marijuana every 10 days. We had underground casinos. We were booking bets by the millions. We spanned from Nebraska to Pennsylvania. Later, I get saved. I'm in full-time ministry, doing vocational ministry. I was a campus pastor. I was consulting churches. I was doing all these things. Even after that, I'd launched a business with one of my mentors who was a VP of HR at Boston Scientific. We launched a healthcare company, and we built it to a $60 million valuation. I've been in everything from illegitimate business to legitimate business, to criminal world to vocational ministry. I've done anything that you can possibly imagine in terms of possibilities of how bad or good that you can be. But here's the question I want to ask you guys, is what do you think, and this is not a rhetorical question because this is small enough, I want to dialogue with you guys a little bit. What do you guys think was the most common thing that I saw with people, whether I was in organized crime, in the church world, in the business world, or otherwise? So what do you think was one of the most common themes that I saw? Ooh. Conflict, that's good. I like that. What else? I know, it's scary when the speaker asks you to speak. Come on, I just want to listen. Hopelessness, that's really good. What else? One more. Need for significance? Absolutely. None of those questions or answers are wrong. I completely agree with all of them. But one of the most common things that I actually saw in people, which was kind of hopelessness and need for attention and all these things, but the thing that I realized the most was every single human being I've ever met lies. I'm not trying to shame anybody. That's not my goal. I don't want to come into, you're all liars. See you later. Thanks for having me. That's not my goal. But the reality is every single human being I've met, including myself, including Jack, including my wife, everybody that I meet lies. But the point me of saying that isn't just to put that out there, but I want to ask, why do you think we lie? Why do you think so many people live under the guise of having to lie about themselves? And here's the weirder part. Most often, we lie to ourselves. And again, completely disagree with me. I'm okay with that. But here's the reason I realized in trying to process this thing, because believe me, if there's anyone who mastered the art of lying, it was me. I didn't even know who I was. I had no clue who I was. In the organized crime world, I was scary boss man. I'd go into my family, I'd be a good businessman. I'd go into the business world, I was almost a philanthropist that just did business. Nobody knew who I was. No one knew. There was not a single person in this world that actually knew who I was, including me, because I spent so much time lying, I had no clue who I was. And I'm not trying to project that on everyone else. I'm just saying it seemed to be an epidemic everywhere I looked. It did not matter if they knew God or didn't know God, if they were in church or were in church. It just didn't make a difference. All I saw was people lying or lying to themselves. And I had to ask the question, why do we do that? And you know what I realized it was? And it was from this woman called Brene Brown, who is just the thought leader in the world of psychology on a very specific topic. And she answered the question when I try to figure out why people lie so much. And she based it on one simple thing. What do you think that is? Judgment? One more guess. Fear. That's a really good one. It came down to shame. It's an epidemic. I don't care how confident a person may seem. I don't care how well off they are financially. I don't care where they are from a geographic location because they live in warm weather and not dying of Minnesota winters. It does not change the fact that every single human being deals with some kind of shame of some type. And what's weird about it is that more often than not, we project that, we amplify that, we create that type of culture, and half the time we don't even know why we do it. But have you ever heard that term that says hurt people hurt people? That's kind of the process. It's the weirdest thing. It's almost subconscious. We don't even know that we're doing it. We just cast out shame. Man, half the time it's because we feel ashamed. And I promise this will pick up. This won't be so bad. One of the things that I realize, especially in the Christian culture, that I want to address is the fact that shame almost has become a cultural norm within Christian circles, especially church circles. And I'll prove my point in a second, okay? But let me just read a verse really quick, and I'm just going to give you the Message translation. It's Galatians chapter 6, verses 2 and 3. It says, "Live creatively, friends. If someone falls into sin, forgivingly restore him, saving your critical comments for yourself. You might be needing forgiveness before the day is out. Stoop down and reach out to those who are oppressed. Share their burdens, and so complete Christ's law. If you think you are too good for that, you are badly deceived." Okay? Not my words. I'm just telling you what the Bible says, right? And I just try to remember that verse as I go into some of this Brene Brown stuff. And I'm just going to give you a few quotes from Brene Brown. I don't recommend listening to her if you're sensitive to cussing. She loves Jesus, but she may cuss a little. So I'm just going to throw that out there. You can judge me for that. She says, "Vulnerability is the birthplace of connection on the path to the feeling of worthiness. If it doesn't feel vulnerable, the sharing is probably not even constructive." I'm going to do two more quickly. "I spent a lot of years trying to outrun or outsmart vulnerability by making things certain, definite, black and white, good and bad. My inability to lean into the discomfort of vulnerability limited the fullness of those important experiences that are wrought with uncertainty, love, belonging, trust, joy, and creativity, just to name a few." And the last one was the one that gave me a gut shot, especially as a Christian, because she said this from a Christian perspective. She says, "Faith minus vulnerability and mystery equals extremism. If you've got all the answers, then don't call what you do faith." Amen. So let me go back to the point of why I think this is an epidemic in the Christian circles. I have a friend who I won't name him, we'll just call him Bobby, because that's the name I always use when I want to replace someone's name. Bobby was this guy who was a part of a denomination that's one of the largest denominations in America. He was a executive leader, number 2 in command, had over 600 staff members reporting to him. This man has helped plant hundreds and hundreds of churches. He's literally been a guy who's taught people how to be a significant leader that can influence people deep and wide. Okay? This guy has done so much significant things for the kingdom of God, it is unbelievable. Here's what happened, and I'll make this story short. Have you guys ever heard of that website? What is it called? I think it was called Ashley Madison. Has anybody heard of that website? Do you know what okay, like, some people don't want to raise their hand because they don't want to admit they know about it. It's okay, maybe I shouldn't have raised my hand. Ashley Madison is this crazy site that literally exists for people who are married that want to cheat on their spouse to be able to cheat on their spouse without their spouse knowing about it. So it's literally a website for cheating spouses. And then you get on there and no one knows about it and you connect with each other and things happen, right? My friend Bobby, he made the mistake of going to this website. Didn't sign up for it, didn't do anything. I literally never went for it, never cheated on his wife. He just got his interest piqued enough to look at the website. Okay? Long story short, a hack happens. I don't know if you guys remember the big hack, that all sorts of websites were getting hacked and they were getting, what's the word, not bribed, blackmailed to give money or we're going to release information. Well, Ashley Madison happened to be one of those sites, and they refused to pay, and they released the name of people who signed up for their website. Not just people who interacted on it, but they released the name of every single human being that's ever signed up for their website. His name happened to be on that site. Immediately what happened after that, this is a man who's literally dedicated his entire life. Again, he took no action other than going to the sites, okay? And I'm not justifying anything that he did. I'm not saying what he did was okay. It was one of the dumbest things he could have possibly done, and that's something I would never recommend for anyone to do. That's why I always recommend having accountability in your life. Believe me, you're not that strong on your own. But his name being on that list, here is the result of that list coming out. Within 48 hours, he was fired. He lost everything that he knew. He had everything shut down that he had his name to. His wife divorced him within a month, and his family refuses to talk to him. He's literally on his own. That was it. That was it. And the way it was handled was immediate shaming. I mean, it was public shaming. They shamed him and excommunicated him out of not just the church, but out of the entire denomination. And not just the church, but his family. And honestly, I'm not even saying what they did was wrong. I just want to, and I can tell you probably 100 more stories just like that. And the issue with it, I see, is we live in a culture that constantly talks about grace, but the instant someone sins, makes a mistake, fails, does anything wrong, the immediate response is, "Wah! Get out the door." Right? That is the immediate response we often get. It is not about grace. It's about shame. I don't care how much we talk about something. If people are people, if we are humans, if we're intuitive, we have the ability to look into each other and we can understand what it means to be human. All the talking in the world does not mean snot to anybody. What people will do is watch the actions that we take as a community, and that will be what we understand of ourselves, of our culture, of our organizations, of our businesses, of our churches, and our families. You can talk about grace and love and Jesus all you want, but if the action that we take says, "Screw you, get out," it is not grace, it is not love. And that's what happens so often. It is unbelievable that it's become a cultural norm. And if we are watching the leaders that we love, the leaders that we have looked up to, the leaders that have spoken into our lives about our own faith, what do you think will happen when we watch them get kicked out? How motivated and inspired are you to go share your sin with someone? No, you tell me, seriously. How motivated are you to go talk about your sin? How old are you? 16. All right, I'm going to use a term that you're 16 and you'll be okay with it. You know one of the most common issues with men across the globe is right now? It's pornography. You know what pornography leads to is typically masturbation, right? I know, it's even awkward to talk about it in church. But there's a sense of shame about it. How do you get over something you can't even talk about? You're just going to let time heal your struggle? Somebody tell me, what are you going to do if you can't talk about your struggle? What do you do if you have an addiction to something and you can't even talk about it? Because there's this thing that's called shame that's literally suffocating people, saying, don't you dare talk about it. Because the culture that you're in will tell you how messed up, how wrong, how sinful, how dirty that you are. As if I don't already know that. Hence the shame that I already feel. And the last thing I need is for someone to agree with me and validate how crappy of a human being I am. Again, I'm not justifying anything. I'm not making excuses for anyone. I'm just saying, listen, I agree with you. That should not be a norm within manhood. I have a daughter now, and that means everything to me when I say that. Because I have friends that are CEOs of anti-trafficking organizations. They're trying to stop sex slavery. And the number one driver to sex slavery is pornography. I dare not ever justify saying that pornography is okay. I don't. Because I have a daughter that someday I have to worry about the fact that grown men might look at her in a way that would make me want to kill them. I'm not justifying it, but I am addressing it because I'm trying to say, if we don't actually allow the conversation and the dialogue to take place, it will continue to become a worse and worse epidemic. It's not going to get better. If we don't set it up and give an opportunity for people to actually have a conversation in heart to heart without having to feel the shame or feel more shame about what they already feel shame about, then it's never going to get solved. You know why I was able to fast forward my ministry career? Because I was just an arrogant, cocky guy. I just came out of being a crime boss, having $1 million to throw around left and right. I would go to Las Vegas spending $250,000 at a blackjack table within 2 hours, and I didn't care. I was cocky. I was arrogant. So when I came into the Christian faith, I still didn't care what people thought. And that sounds really bad, but you know what? It really, really helped me. Because I was able to talk about the dirtiest, most messed up aspects of my life and allowed the opportunity for people to genuinely speak in to those dark, dark corners of my heart. Do you know what it's like looking at a guy who's never had any type of violence in his life, and I had to sit down with him and his wife and say, I think about killing people. And I said it nonchalantly. How do you have a conversation like that? Yeah, I didn't think about watching porn. I thought about making porn. I was a terrible human being. I was an absolutely terrible human being. I was dirty. I was messed up. I came out of organized crime. We romanticize organized crime in America because we think it's something good and holy. It's not. It's violent. It's dark. It's angry. It's filled with vendetta and fights and blood. I have blood on my hands. I should not be standing here. But the fact that I am means that I was able to have very real conversations with people who knew God, loved God, and were able to love me through my darkest sin. I did not allow my shame to quench my ability to fully know God and become what God has for me. But in church, we often do. And again, no one has to agree with me. This isn't my church. I'm not leading this church, so I can say things most pastors can't say. Right? I don't even, and when people ask, are you a pastor? I say, nope, I'm a motivational speaker. And sometimes I motivate the wrong way, but that's what I'm sticking to.
I'm with you, baby, though. Amen. Preach.
But here's the thing. Shame has a very specific message, right? Shame does a very specific thing. Shame does this to you. You made a mistake, right? You've made a mistake. I don't even know you. You've made a mistake before, right? You probably made a mistake today or this morning or this week some point, right? But here, something normal about a church would be, if this is a loving, grace-filled church, when you made a mistake, everyone says, yep, you made a mistake. On the other hand, you know what shame does? You know what shame would tell you if you made a mistake? Tell you, you are a mistake. Right? There's a very big difference. Making a mistake, being a mistake. You failed before, right? I don't know you. You failed before. You failed this week, I bet, at something. You failed before. You probably play a game. Tells you game over at some point, right? That means you failed, right? But here's the difference. You failed. All good. Keep moving. Shame says, what? You're a failure. Right? And when you say it to yourself, it's ironically, it's the most antagonistic when you say it to yourself. If you ever listen to your own negative self-talk, I can't guarantee much, but I promise you, your negative self-talk is probably the most aggressive negative talk that you will ever hear. It will be more negative than anything else that you can hear from. No one else will tell you how messed up you are than yourself. Because you amplify your mistakes and your failures way more than anyone else does. You have less grace for yourself than most people have for you. You could disagree with me, but I'm just saying that seems to be a very general theme in most people. Alright. So I just want to separate saying, hey, we all make mistakes, we all fail, we all sin. If we didn't sin, if we were perfect, there would be no point in Jesus, there would be no point in coming to church. Everything is good. But I'm just saying, those mistakes don't make you or don't define you. Those failures don't define you. There's something else that defines us. And there's a reason why we have these conversations. And let me even push this a little bit further. Understand that the cultural norms within America that we live in are actually pushing the agenda of shame without even knowing it, okay? And everything I'm about to tell you is based on hours and hours and hours of research by the thousands of hours by doctors and leading psychologists, leading therapists and leading researchers. I'm going to start with women. Are you guys cool with that? If you guys have your puke bags, get them ready. Okay, the question that they asked was this. It says, what do women need to do to conform to female norms? Okay, I'm going to repeat that. What do women need to do to conform to female norms? I'm sorry to pick on you. What would you think? Give me an answer, anything. Yep. What do you think you have to do to conform to female norms in the United States of America? Say that again? Dress the way. That's a fantastic answer. Dress the way that everyone else does. Carmen, give me an answer. What do you think you have to do to conform to female norms?
Watch what I eat.
Watch what you eat. I love watching what I eat as I eat it. That's a great answer. Okay, these are the actual statistical responses that we have as the norms for women in America. Ready? You have to be nice. You have to be thin. You have to be modest. And you have to use all available resources for your appearance. One more time. You have to be nice, thin, modest, and you have to use all your available resources for your appearance. Wow! That is the society that we live in. Okay, and let me tell you why I care. I get heated every time. Like last time I did this was an entirely business group of people. There was men there was women there was Muslims there was Hindus there there's all sorts of people there. I didn't care and I went at it. And when you're in church, you kind of try to calm yourself down. I'm Middle Eastern, so I'm very typical cliche. I get way too crazy sometimes. But in front of business people, I think whatever. I don't care. I'm going to go nuts, right? And Here's what drove me nuts about this situation. I have a wife who's clearly pregnant. We have a baby due in another 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that. And after we had that cute little munchkin, it was probably, I don't even know, maybe a few months later after we had our baby, my wife and I were just sitting in the car and we're driving. I've made my wife cry before, and it's 100% my fault. I've definitely yelled at my wife and apologized a lot. We have fought, we've argued, we have done every mistake in the book that you can possibly imagine. It's usually 90% me, 10% of the time it's her, and I'm actually being modest. She probably does less, but this was a weird situation where I'm sitting in the car, we're just listening to music. I've done nothing wrong because I know I haven't said anything, and anything I did say, it wasn't negative, and all of a sudden my wife starts crying, and I'm looking at her, I'm like, what did I do? What did I do? And she's like, nothing, and she's in the middle of her crying, and I'm trying to figure out, I'm sitting there thinking, what did I do? Did she talk to me and I missed it and she feels rejected? What just happened? And she finally musters up and I'll make a long story short. There's a stupid billboard that we drove by that basically made my wife, who just gave birth to a several-pound human being, came out of her body, and it's only been 2 months later, and some billboard made my wife feel fat. And she was crying. My wife is stunning. She's one of the most beautiful women I have ever seen in my life, and I'm okay with guys coming up to me telling me my wife is hot. I'm like, yeah, I agree with you. I'm not even mad at you. You're right, my wife is hot. But no matter how good a woman can look, no matter what miracle just came out of their body after a child living inside them for 9 months, my wife felt enough shame from a single billboard for her to cry about her body. That to me drove me nuts. As a man, you don't understand. My response is somebody attacking my family or making my family feel hurt. I don't care if it's my wife or my child. I will show you an un-Christian side of me that you never want to see. But what do I do when I'm looking at a billboard? Do I punch the billboard? What do I do with that billboard? But it's the reality in which that women have to live. You constantly get this message that says you're not thin enough, you're not modest enough, you're not spending enough money to put it towards your appearances. How much garbage is that? Who wants to live in that kind of life? It is literally laced into the norms of our culture. And we can dismiss it and act like it's not happening, but it's happening on a daily basis. As a matter of fact, let me give you this. Let me actually ask you this. Carmen, you can't answer because you're a marketing guru. On a daily basis, how many times do you think people are marketed to on a daily basis? Throw out numbers. Just random numbers.
I'm married to the guru, but a lot.
That's almost a number.
I would say all day.
Give me a number. 500, 50, 2. 1,000. Okay. Give me a number, Steve.
2,500.
2,500. Give me a number.
5,000.
5,000. Closest one. What's your name? Joe. Closest one. I'm pretty sure this number is up because this is a statistic from 2015. You are marketed to you're actually marketed to more than any of us are. Younger people are marketed to than anyone else. On a daily basis, all people are marketed to a minimum 6,000 times a day. You're marketed to 6,000 times a day. Okay? Now we're going to play a math game here. 30 to 50% of these marketing ads that you see actually consistently use women or sex for marketing purposes. Even the models that they use, so like the 6 foot tall, thin, whatever Victoria's Secret models that they use, and they put on these billboards and they put on the ads that you see, they're still not good enough because 100% of them are still paintbrushed, or what is that terminology called? Airbrushed. I mean, you're seeing a digital version of them that's not even the reality of their own body. So not only is their body completely unrealistic, but that's not even good enough, where they're still cutting off things off the side, and then what you're seeing is the unrealistic version of the unrealistic person. And that's what we have to live by. That's what women have to live by. That's the norm women have to live by. It's a digital girl that doesn't even exist. How crazy is that? Okay? Now keep following along with me. Now, studies based on Harvard, Florida State, and other universities says a person needs anywhere between 3 to 10 positive comments about them to every negative one that they hear or feel. Okay? So, Steve, if I look at you and say, you're fat, and if that hurt you, you have to walk away and you have to wait for someone to tell you a minimum of 3 times how pretty you are, how good looking you are, how handsome you are, before you go back to your balance point. It doesn't even make you feel more confident. It brings you back to your balance point, right? Where now you're not at a point where you feel so negative about yourself. It's literally bringing you back to 0, right? You just went down a few notches and took 3 compliments, a minimum of 3 compliments to bring you back up, okay? Now, let's just say it's not 30 to 50% of these ads that are based on unrealistic women and selling sex to you. Let's just say it's 10% of those ads, okay? That means women get slapped by something negative no less than 600 times a day based on one of the 4 criteria that I just listed for cultural norms. Men, don't worry, I'll get to you. I just think the women part is a little bit more sensitive to me. 600 times a day, Carmen, you are told something negative about you. Every single day, whether you know it or not, subconsciously you've accepted it. Every single day you're told something negative about you. If that's the case, then for every time something negative is spoken to you, that puts your husbands, your sons, your mothers, your sisters, aunts, uncles, grandparents, kids, friends, whatever, for every negative comment you get, and let's just say it's that minimum market, not 10, let's just say 3, that means every single day. And I feel like I'm decent now at complimenting my wife, like, I'm okay at best. But if I had to try to balance her out based on the 600 times a day that she gets a negative ad, I would have to compliment my wife 1,800 times a day. Not to even make her feel good, just to bring her back to normal. 1,800 times a day. I don't care how good of an encourager you are, you don't got to stand a chance. Ain't no way. I don't care, Jack, how good you are at talking and telling your wife she's hot and beautiful and amazing and smart and blah, blah, blah. Ain't no man on earth got 1,800 compliments in them every single day just to bring their wife back to normal. I'm just saying, you could disagree with me, but I don't got that in me. I can't even think of 1,800 compliments to give in the same day, unless I could use the same one every single time. And it's a numbers game, but that, to me, that is completely ludicrous. The point I'm just trying to make is shame is literally riddled in every single day life. We can keep avoiding this conversation as if it's not happening, but it's riddled in your life. Every single day, every time you look at your iPad, your iPhone, your laptop, you look at your billboard, you look at a magazine, you look at a TV show, you look at anything, something is shaming you. And I'm not trying to depress you. I'm just saying, if you want to fight a fight, you got to understand what you are fighting. You don't just go into war being like, man, I'm just hopefully going to shoot something that's shooting at me. It doesn't make sense. At least figure out what the issue is and understand it, have awareness of it, so that you can even have a fighting chance before it even starts. And then I'm going to go to these men parts, okay? What do men need to do to conform to male norms? What do men need to do to conform to male norms? Jack, I haven't picked on you. Give me one thing. What do you think you have to do to conform to male norms?
Physical, money, you got to provide money, be a great dad, be a great lover, be a great everything, pretty much.
Just overzealous. Overzealous, Jack. Just took it from everyone else. Okay. It's all good. All right, you guys ready? Here's the cultural norms of men in society of the United States of America. The 4 things you have to do is always show emotional control. Would you disagree with that? Okay. Work is first. No one's disagreeing so far. Good. Pursue status. I don't even know what to do with this one. This is the 4th point. Violence. It says violence. They couldn't narrow it down. They had to keep it vague and broad, so they had to write violence. I don't even know what that means. Like I think you have to punch me to feel normal as a guy here. I honestly don't even know what that means. Like unless you're punching some other guy or like watching action movies or something, which I love action movies. Apparently you're not normal as a guy. But here's the one I want to pick on: is work is first. Would any man in this room or a woman in this room disagree that work is first is a cultural norm of America? Would anyone disagree with that? If you disagree, raise your hand. Not a single person is raising their hand. If work is first, what is not first? What else is not first? Marriage. God! We're all standing in church. They're like, but I came to church. Awesome. Awesome. You put an hour in. I mean, come on. That's like me going to Burger King and saying I'm a burger. Showing up to church on Sunday doesn't make you a Christian. Right? It's a real thing. But that's the weird thing. If you have to think about it, we have conflicting messages. You come to church and somebody tells you, you better love your family. You better love your wife. You better love your God. You better understand where your priorities are. And the instant you walk out of that room, everything is telling you something different. Work is first. Women, how many of you want to know that you come number 2 to their husband or to your husband? You want to be number 2 to your husband? You want to be number 1. Right? But it's like a weird situation. The norm that we live in, men, is when you walk outside, the entire world is telling you, if you don't put work first, you're not a man. And then when you go home, you have to deal with the wife that feels like she's being rejected and abandoned and isn't being prioritized because she isn't. She is number 2 to your work. And then we talk about God like, come on. Let me look at your checkbook. Let me look at your journal. Let me look at certain aspects of your life, and I'll tell you where God is in your life. With that, I don't want you to tell me anything. Just let me look at personal aspects of your life. I'll tell you where God is prioritized in your life and how much you actually believe in Him. I'm not trying to be antagonistic. I'm just trying to make a point. We live in a society that tells you work is first, and we do that, and we do that well. We will bust our butts to provide for our families, thinking that we're doing the right thing, but more often than not, we're leaving a wake of abandoned, rejected people behind us who happen to be the people that we love the most. So you walk out these doors, if you try to prioritize your family and put them first, or you try to prioritize God, you're shamed. You walk back into your house, and because you prioritized work, because your family feels rejected, you're shamed. It's a zero-sum game. Guys, we lose. We walk out the door, we lose. Of our house, we lose. Of our church, we lose. Of our family, we lose. Because everything that the society tells us is the opposite of what the Bible tells us, more often than not. We live in a constant cycle of shame. So depressing, I know. Armin will make this inspiring. God willing, Jesus be here. Okay. Here's the most interesting thing that she said. 2 most interesting things that Brene Brown and all these doctors' research says. She said if you were to put shame in a petri dish, it would need 3 ingredients to grow exponentially. Somebody throw out one thing that you think that you need as an ingredient to grow shame exponentially. Secret. Oh my, failed it. Okay, one more. Reinforcement. Man, I'm going to get you guys talking one of these days. All right. Here's what it is. Secrecy is right, is one of them. So she says, if you were to put shame in a petri dish, it would need 3 ingredients to grow exponentially. 1, secrecy. 2, silence. 3, judgment. Okay? I'm going to repeat that. If you were to put your shame in a petri dish, look at it under a microscope to see what are the ingredients that make up your shame on a daily basis, here's what they are. You are secretive. There's secrecy in this petri dish. You are silent about the things that you are ashamed of, which is creating more cycle of shame and deepening your shame. And 3, judgment. And judgment goes multiple ways. It's not about other people judging you all the time. It's about you judging yourself. It's about you judging other people. It's about other people judging you. And here's the weird thing. It's psychologically been proven that the more you judge others, the more you feel judged by others. How weird is that? The more you judge others, the more you feel judged by others. It is a vicious cycle. It is a vicious cycle. So every time you look at someone and say they're fat, guess what's going to happen to you? Because there's a lot more eyes looking at you than you looking at that one person. Right? You look at someone and say they're ugly. You say look at someone and say they're broke. You look at someone and say they're whatever. But just remember, in this world, there's always going to be more eyes on you than you are on them. And that cycle of you judging others makes you feel judged. It's not a winning game, okay? So, what is the antidote to shame? Somebody just yell out something random. What is the antidote to shame, you think?
Bring it into the light.
Bring it into the light? I like that. One more. You guys in that back table, I'm going to pick on you. I'm sorry. If you think there's an antidote to shame, what do you think it would be? Forgiveness? That's a really good one. What do you guys think? Anything? Talking about it? I love that answer. Here's what it is. You guys ready? She said, the antidote to shame is something so simple. Empathy. Empathy is the antidote to shame. She said, if you were to put the same amount of shame into another petri dish and douse it with empathy, it cannot survive. It is impossible for shame to survive in an environment where there's empathy, real empathy. There's a difference between sympathy and empathy. Where empathy exists, shame cannot. Okay? Like if you were to break down the word grace, empathy would be somewhere in there. Here's the other question that they asked. She says, what do you think the 2 most powerful words a person can hear when they're in struggle? Does anybody want to guess? 2 most powerful words a person can hear if they're in the middle of a struggle. You know what it was? What would you say?
I understand.
I understand. Me too. The 2 most powerful words a human being can hear when they're in the middle of their struggle, whether that's their addiction to alcohol, porn, money, business, I don't know, drugs, whatever it is. The 2 most powerful words a person can hear when they're in a struggle, whether it could be depression, it could be emotional, it could be mental, it could be physical, it could be anything, any type of struggle. The 2 most powerful words a human being can hear in the middle of their struggle is me too. Me too. Look, if we're going to find our way back to each other, vulnerability is going to be the path. Most of us stand outside the arena of struggle and say, I'm going to go in there, kick some butt, once I have life under control and I become bulletproof. Okay. But everybody who's in the midst of a struggle is waiting for someone that can empathize with them and just simply say, look, me too, man. Me too. You struggle with lust? Me too. You struggle with anger? Me too. We spend so much time trying to make sure that people have this crazy perception of us, of how holy I am, how righteous I am, how incredibly brilliant of a businessman I am, how incredible of a husband I am, what a great father I am. I'm trying to put off all these perceptions that may not actually be reality at all, because we live in a Facebook status world now, that it's all about perception, not even about your reality, because we want everyone to see our highlights, but because we're so busy milking this thing called perception about how holy and righteous and good and put together we are, that we don't even know who we are anymore. And people don't even know who we are anymore. Nobody wants that, but that's the exact culture that we've created. We're living in a society that actually wants people to know who you are. And we want to know other people, and other people want to know us. But we allow technology and all these weird things to put us in a perception-based culture, and it's so dumb. Because no one really even knows us anymore. We have an entire generation that my daughter's going to grow up and convinced that because she got a friend added on some stupid social media page that somehow she actually got a friend. And it's because somebody liked something that she said that they like her. But they like her as much as the last post. If the last post that she makes is stupid and they don't like it, now she's just stupid. And now she's disliked. Now she's dismissed. What's the point of that? It's not about you getting your stuff figured out so that people can look at you and realize how amazing you are. It's about your struggle. Your struggle is the most amazing thing. No matter how hard it is for you, it is one of the greatest tools that you have to literally and in the most amazing way bond with someone. Real relationship. People that actually know who you are. They know your struggle. They know your temptation. They know your sin. They know how you mess up. But they're still sitting by your side looking at you like, yep, I'm not going anywhere. That's a friendship. It's someone that's looking at you and saying, man, you know what? Me too. I'm not going anywhere. That's relationship. But you know what Christians are famous for? When I go up to someone and say, hey man, I'm really struggling with blah, blah, blah. You know what Christians are famous for? What do you think Christians say when I walk up to them and say I'm in the middle of a struggle? I'll pray for you. I don't want your prayer. I don't want your prayer. Or you know what the other thing is they always say to me? When I go, hey man, I got a problem. Here's what I'm struggling with. I got this crazy addiction to porn. Or I got this crazy addiction to alcohol. Or I got this crazy addiction to anger. Or I got this crazy addiction to jumping out of my car and punching people in the face. Or whatever my issue is. You know what they say? You should. You should. You should pray about it. You should get blah blah. You should see blah blah. Screw you. You should. I don't want to hear that. I'm not sitting here trying to have a conversation with you for me to tell me what I should do. I'm sitting here trying to have a conversation so I can let you into my life. I want you to know who I am, and I want you to know that after you know who I am, that you're still going to sit there with me. What did Jesus do? What kind of people did he surround himself with? Were they all high priests of the Jewish circles? Come on! That is not the culture that Jesus created, but somehow we have convinced ourselves in an entire Christian faith that we're supposed to put out a perception of how holy and righteous we are so that we can have relationships. No, that is not it. Christian's culture is supposed to be about a bunch of broken people who are lost in sin, who have nothing else to depend on other than the love of Christ, and to have a bunch of people sitting around together saying, look man, me too. I mess up all the time. I'm hurt. I'm depressed. I'm angry. I don't even know how to be a good husband. I don't know how to be a good father because I didn't have a father. I don't know how to be a good businessman because I procrastinate everything. And the root issue of my procrastination isn't because I'm lazy. It's just because I'm so scared of failing again. I'm sick of failing, so I don't want to start something else. People just want to bond with you. People want to connect with you. It's okay to be in pain. It's okay to be depressed. It's okay to be angry. I don't want you to stay there, but I just want you to have a real conversation so you can finally get out. Jesus did not create a culture that says you should be silent of your sin. Literally in James it said you should confess your sins to one another that you can be healed. It didn't say confess your sins to me. He didn't say look up to the sky. He said look to each other, look in each other's eyes, and confess your sins so that you can be healed. God is literally laying it out for us and saying, look, your healing process starts with each other, not just always sitting here with me. That's the beginning of the relationship. That's not the end of the relationship. The currency of the kingdom of God is people. It's not money, it's not gold, it's people. And if you can't surround yourself with people who know God, love God, and struggle just like you do, what is the point? That's isolation. That's independence. That's a lonely life. What is the point of a lonely life? All the success in the world didn't mean anything to me because I had no one celebrating it with me. didn't I care about losing a couple $100,000 at a blackjack table? Because it wouldn't matter whether I lost it or won it. Nobody would care. No one cared about my success other than the ones that were using me to make more money. What's the point? You know, when they did a research on a bunch of psychologists and therapists got together, and psychologists back in the, I think, 50s or 60s, they did the most morbid research and study. They started going and talking to people who attempted suicide but were not successful. And they asked them the question, why did you try to take your life? You know what the number one answer to that question was? I mean, this made up almost the entire response from everybody. In one way or another, every single person said, because I didn't have a purpose. Because I didn't have meaning. I had nothing to live for. And then when you get into that study, you realize most of them, the number one thing they lacked was relationship. Our lack of vulnerability, our cycle of shame, is one of the biggest causes of suicide in America, in the world. And you know who's most at threat for it? It's kids in high school and going into college and that are in college. It's like the number 3 or number 2 leading cause of death now. Tell me as a mom that doesn't make you think I want to fight that. Who else is a parent in here? Tell me you don't want to fight that. Why would you not want to fight that? All the talking doesn't do it. All the Bible verses don't do it. It has to be a culture where your kids feel like they have real relationships. We have to model it for them that says, look, man, I'm messed up too. They have to feel safe sharing their sins with each other. We have to model it so that they go out and create that same culture. So that they can really see the power of Christ. So they can see the real power of salvation. So they can see the real power of redemption. They can't do it when we sit here and hide and keep things secret. It's like mold in a garage or in a closet somewhere and we hide it and pretend like, nope, there's nothing in there. All it does is just grow the mold. You open this door that you're hiding your little secrets in and let the light shine on it, that mold is dead. But the cycle that we live in, the enemy that speaks to us, the cultures that we're a part of constantly tell you, no, hide your secret. So that you're not shamed out of your church, out of your culture, out of your business, out of your marriage, out of your family. Hide it all. Look, statistically, we're the most isolated society on planet Earth. Statistically, we are the most socially isolated culture and society on planet Earth. As in, they used real metrics to come up with this conclusion. Number of miles and minutes we drive to get to work. Number of miles and minutes we drive to get to school. Number of hours that we spend with other people outside of our family or invite into our home. I mean, there's literally metrics involved in this to answer that question. America came out on top. And that's not a research we wanted to come out on top of. We're a socially isolated culture. And we wonder why depression is running rampant. We wonder why suicide is running rampant. We wonder why churches are dying. We literally close 3,500 to 4,000 church doors a year. A year. A year. And you guys wonder why it's so important for a church like this to exist? Because at the rate that we're going, it may not. Earlier I said the two most powerful words a person can hear when they're in struggle is "me too." And I've told you the two most powerful the most used words a Christian uses is "you should" or "I'll pray for you." So the next time somebody is actually able to take that leap of vulnerability and tell you that they're in struggle, I just want you guys to remember 2 words. Forget everything else I said that's been so depressing. Just remember "me too." Just remember "me too." Yo, I was driving the other day, this guy cut me off, and it was crazy because all I wanted to do, because my daughter was in the car, he put her at risk, I wanted to cut him off, I wanted to get out of my car, and I'll pull out, and I'll beat the crap out of him. Me too. Yo, I was just trying to pray the other day in the middle of the night because I know it's an important part of my life, but I fell asleep. Me too. Literally what I just did last night. I was trying to read the Bible the other day just so I could actually get that chore done, because that's what I believe Bible reading is half the time, and I fell asleep doing that too. Me too. Me too. Me too. You get angry? Me too. You have a temper? Me too. You messed up? Me too. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. We don't have to let our problems become this crazy thing that makes us hide. It could be this most powerful, most inspirational, most exhilarating thing that we can be a part of, because you're a part of a group of people that say, me too. Now you should. Now you're messed up. Go hide. You're dirty. It's me too. Come on. I mean, that makes me go gangster, and I'm not even trying to, but I'm just saying, if you want to see what kind of people want to walk into what kind of culture and what kind of church, they want to walk into a Me Too church because they're so sick of a You Should church. 4,000 churches are closing every year because people are sick of hearing You Should. Everyone wants to hear Me Too because there's no one. I don't care how pastoral they seem. Are they perfect? I don't care what degree they have. They're not perfect. I don't care because it's not true. They're not. We just want to relate to each other. Just cut the crap. Be real. Talk. Have real conversation. And if people aren't willing to stay there with you after you have that conversation, good. Forget them. They were never even a friend. What's the point of all these crappy relationships that mean nothing, that could be gone tomorrow because you said one wrong thing? It's not a friendship. That's not family. That's not church. That's not community. That's not fellowship. That's garbage. In Philippians 1, 29-30, Paul is writing to the church, and he says, "For it has been granted to you on behalf of Christ not only to believe in Him, but also to suffer for Him. Please listen to this. It says, since you are going through the same struggle you saw I had, and now here I still have." Listen to me. This is Paul, while he's locked up in prison for preaching the gospel of God, speaking and writing to a church who is the apostle who has written 70% of the New Testament that we read. He's writing to a church, and he's not saying because I'm a greater leader, I'm a better Christ follower, because I'm a better person, because I'm so much more holy, because I'm so much more righteous than you, you should do what I said. But he went to say, "For it has been granted to you on behalf of Christ not only to believe in Him, but also to suffer for Him, since you are going through the same struggle you saw I had, and now here I still have." Come on. Paul, this is a perfect man in the eyes of God at this point, I would imagine. How many churches did he plant? How many places did he spread the gospel? What did he do for the love of God? How many people did he save? How many people did he heal? How many miracles did he do? How many disciples did he make? If there's anyone that could be known as righteous or holy, it was him. But he's still sitting here relating to a church that became one of the most instrumental churches in the entire history of Christianity, and became one of the most important books of the entire Bible. How many Philippians verses do you know? How many people know Philippians 4:13? You see it tattooed on fighters' bodies in the UFC. How many verses are out of Philippians? You know where all those great verses came from? You know why they're the most powerful verses? You know why they're the most memorized verses besides John 3:16? Because they came out of struggle. And everyone relates to it. Everyone wants it. Everyone holds on to it, because it's the hope that we have, is knowing that other people struggle just like we struggle, but there's a hope in it because there's a God that loves us through our struggles. I mean, look at Jesus' example. Did he do what the Pharisees did? Did he stand on some kind of stage and preach down to people and tell them, hey, there's how much of the gospel, sorry, not the gospel, but how much of the Torah I know, and how much of the Torah you should know, and here's how holy I am, why aren't you holy like me? Is that what Jesus did? Who did he rebuke more often than not? Was it the Gentiles, or was it the Jewish people who were the leaders of the Jewish religion? Who did he fight? He fought the Pharisees. He fought the religious leaders that cared more about what people thought in terms of how holy and righteous they are. despite the Gentiles, he protected them. The people who were broken, the people who were lost, the people who were left out, the people who were caught in sin. He stood in the gap in front of them and stood toe-to-toe with the Pharisees and says, what makes you perfect? You without sin, you cast the first stone. He stood up for the sinner. He didn't stand up for the religious. I mean, think about it. Jesus came down the stairway of heaven as a holy God, as the King of Kings. He walks down and he came to earth in the most vulnerable state a human being can possibly be in a state of an infant. Can't walk, can't talk, you can't even pee by yourself. That's about as vulnerable as it gets. He came into the most vulnerable state a human being can be. He stepped down that staircase of heaven, being born into a virgin in Bethlehem, which was the nastiest place, and he ended up growing in Nazareth, and he walked on earth. He suffered like you suffered. He struggled like you struggled. He was tempted like you were tempted. And he came down where you are so you can know when you struggle that you've got a God who doesn't stand on a stage talking down to you, but steps down into your situation and says, me too. The model of God. I could sit in my throne room and look down at you all day long telling you what to do, or I will put myself in the most vulnerable state that I can possibly put myself in, and I will come into your area so I can know what your temptation is. I can know what your sin is. I can know what your struggle is, so that you know that you have a God that can understand and empathize with you. The death of Christ is the most amazing thing I've ever seen, and I can't help cry every single time I think about it, vividly think about the death of Christ. Because when I was 3 or 4 years old, I watched a man get whipped to death from me to this couch. And when I went to wipe my tears, I realized I wasn't crying, I was wiping away his blood. So when I think about the death of Christ, I can't help but imagine it in the most vivid way possible. Because there's a Christ that came into this world and saw how much pain there was, saw how much temptation there was, he saw how much hurt there was, and he wanted nothing more than to take that sin onto himself. So he sat, got beat, got mocked, got whipped, had the flesh literally ripped off of his back, dragged a cross that he could barely carry, got into a hell where they laid him down on a piece of wood, and they stretched his arms out as far as they could. They nailed him through the cross of his wrist, and then they put his feet down, arching point forward, and they hammered a nail that's meant for a railroad track through it, and he sat there and he suffocated to death in the most slow and torturous way possible. Was he just trying to be a gruesome, messed up, morbid God? Or was he trying to say, I know the sin, I know the pain, I know the torture, I know how much damage that you're going through, and I want to take it onto myself. Think about that. How badly did he want to suffer for you? How badly did he want to step into your struggle so that you can have something that actually understands you, and it's not some foreign deity, some faraway deity that we can't even relate to, that sends us a bunch of lists of to-dos and do-nots so we can feel like we're finally accepted. But we have a God that says, I chose you before you chose me. I knew you before you ever knew me. I loved you before you ever loved me. That's a God I want to serve. And that's a culture I want to be a part of, is people who actually understand that the culture of God is to be okay with the struggle. Not to live in it, but to be okay and understand it's a part of life so that you can conquer it. Did Jesus stay dead? Did Jesus stay dead? Jesus conquered the grave. He rose after 3 days, and if he didn't, the entire Bible is the most worthless garbage we have ever read. It's just a bunch of people talking about good things and a good guy who had good advice for people. If God did not raise Jesus from the dead after 3 days, the whole Bible is pointless. And if he did, it was the most significant point in history. It was the most significant thing in humanity. It was the most significant thing in the universe. Because that was a God that says, your struggle, your pain, your temptation will not keep you down. I will rise you from the ashes like the phoenix. I will rise you from the ashes of your defeat. I will rise you from the ashes of your sin. I will rise you from the ashes of your temptations and put you into a holy family of God-believing, God-fearing people who will love you more than they will ever judge you. That is the gospel of God. Not this crazy thing that we have created in the church that tells us we have to hide our secrets. That we have to pretend to be something that we're not. That's so pointless. People, I'm sorry, that is so pointless. You get nothing out of it. And the people around you don't get anything out of it. Why am I even crying? Look, I'm going to say this. I don't even care about the rest of this. One of my favorite stories is out of Genesis. And I'll end on this. I'm going way too long. I'm sorry. You guys don't ever bring me back. My favorite story is out of Genesis. And it's the story of this guy named Jacob. And his name literally meant manipulator, deceiver, to grab at the ankle, because that's what he did when his brother was born. He was trying to come out of the womb before he did, so he's grabbing at the ankle of his brother, trying to come out first. He was a deceiver. That's what he was literally known for. That was his name. He was identified as the deceiver, the manipulator, basically the crappy human being in the bunch. And years later, when Jacob is an older man, he's an adult, not old man, he has this situation where there's this man that he's wrestling with. He doesn't know who this man is. And they get into this violent wrestling match. Okay? Anybody seen UFC? Okay. This isn't fake wrestling like WWE. Even though one of my friends was a WWE wrestler, I shouldn't say that. He'd body slam me. It was a violent wrestling match. To the point where Jacob was so hard-headed that he would not let go of this guy that he's wrestling with, even though he's basically beating him, that this guy ends up just touching his hip, dislocating his hip. Dislocated shoulder? I get that. Hip? Dislocated his hip. Okay? That's probably got to be the most painful thing that you could possibly imagine. He's just dislocating your hip. Like, what do you do with that, right? He dislocates his hip. That is an angry, violent fight going on. And in the midst of it, Jacob is sitting there, holding on to this guy, will not let go. Even though he's in this struggle that he can't beat, he's holding on to this guy. And what he doesn't know is he was wrestling with God. His struggle was with God. It was man. God in the form of man struggling with Jacob, and he would not let him go. And Jacob, with all the pain and all the agony of a dislocated hip, he hangs on to this man and he says, I will not let you go until you bless me. And in that moment, God stops wrestling with Jacob and he says, what's your name? It's God. He already knows his name, but he wants to make a proclamation that was about to take place. And Jacob says to him, my name is Jacob. And God right there prophetically proclaims something and changed the entire destiny of Jacob. And he says, from this day forth, you will no longer be known as Jacob. AKA, you will no longer be known as a deceiver. You will no longer be known as a manipulator. You will no longer be known as the person grasping at the heel of those ahead of you. You will no longer be known as the bad person. From this day forth, you will now be known as Israel. God later goes on to find an entire people group, and he calls them his chosen people. His chosen people. His chosen nation. And he blessed them. And he gave them things that they could have never have imagined. He gave Jacob things by making him named Israel, things that he could have never imagined. You know what the most common translation to the word Israel is? To struggle with God. The best nation of Israel, the blessed man Jacob, his name became Israel. God did not bless him despite his struggle. God did not bless Israel, the nation, despite all the ways they struggled with God. He literally blessed them because of the struggle. A blessed, chosen people are known to struggle with God. I promise you, coming out of organized crime, coming out of a culture where I have more PTSD than most military guys do coming back from Afghanistan, because those are the only psychologists that can actually see me and deal with me. I've seen more violence, seen more blood, seen more death, seen more anger, done more wrong, have more sin, have no reason to judge anyone. Believe me, when I say the struggle is real in my life, it is very, very real. The only reason that I can even stand in front of you, it's not because I think I'm better than you. It's not because I think I'm more righteous than you. It's because I'm standing in front of you because I want you to see someone that has struggled more than you've struggled, that has sinned more than you will ever sin, is a worse person than you will ever be. And if I deserve the grace of God, so do you. It is impossible for me to accept the grace and love of God if you don't. It makes it pointless. You can't look at me and tell me I deserve His love if you can't look at yourself and say the exact same thing and mean it 10 times more. This church, this community, this city, come on guys, it needs this. It needs this. Look, we got couches, we're sitting here, we're dialoguing, we're going to have real conversation. You know what real conversation means? We can have real dialogue about real struggles so that we can get real solutions to real problems, to conquer real things, to become real Christians that really follow God, that really know Jesus, so that we can be an actual church that does actual damage to the kingdom of hell.
Amen.
That's you guys. And if you can create that culture here, then the numbers that we end up talking about of how many people are coming in the door will really mean something. Your culture will dictate everything. And I promise you, and I'm not saying this to brag, I have consulted over 100 churches. I have now planted my 35th church. Not me personally, but I help plant churches. It is one of the most rare aspects of Christianity to have a church that is willing to struggle with each other for the sake of the kingdom of God to get somewhere that authentically makes you holy. Not pretend, not fake, not put on masks, but actually go through the struggle and the process to be something that people can look at and I say, I see Jesus in you. Because you struggled like I struggled. That is one of the most magnetic traits of humanity. You know when they ask my generation, what is the number one trait you look for in a leader? You know what my generation says? My generation, the millennial generation, is the second largest generation in the world. After the baby boomers pass on, the largest generation in this world is going to be my millennial generation. And you know what we look for more than anything else in this world? Authenticity. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how much money you have. I don't care where you came from. I don't care what you do. If you're not authentic, I could care less about you. I could care less what you have to say. They think the same thing about church. It's a bunch of people pretending to be something that they're not. But what if we were a type of church that says, me too? What would happen to the millennial generation? What would happen to Blaine? What would happen to Minnesota? What would happen to America? I'm not worried about the rest of the world. Let's just worry about our community. What would happen if we became a Me Too church? We can't let this slip through our hands, guys. I'm telling you, it's rare. Don't let a church community go without getting committed, because this does not exist. It is rare. Invest in it. Not just with money, but invest in it with your time. Go talk to Jack. Say, Jack, September is coming. This is our biggest push. This is our kickoff. This is our make it, break it year. Where can I step in? How can I volunteer? How can I lead? Who can I talk to? What can I do? I'm not saying it for them. I'm literally saying it for you. You want this church. You want a Me Too church. You know why I love Jack? Because he was a Me Too guy before he even knew it. He told me about his sins before he told me about his church plant. I loved him for that. Because I'm used to a very, very different kind of pastor. They tell me about all they do wrong. They want to know all that I did wrong so they can pray for me. Jack told me everything that he did wrong, and then he followed it up with, by the way, I think I'm going to plant the church. He basically lost all his credibility with me if he knows a normal Christian, and said, oh, by the way, I'm gonna do this church thing and invite people to it. Oh, okay, Jack.
But I loved him. And he keeps asking me, why do you believe in me? Dude, because you're real. Because you're real. A real church with a real leader with real conversations does not exist. Fight for this, guys. I'm telling you, it's worth fighting for. And you're going to get some messed up people in here like me. And we're not fun to be around for like the first year. It sucks. We're terrible people. I get it. But at some point, they may become the next Billy Graham. I'm going to Honduras, and I'm going specifically to the most dangerous city in the most dangerous country in the world because I know that there's a bunch of people there that are all organized crime. They've killed almost every single pastor there, where they say, quote unquote, pastors have become extinct, because I feel like I'm the only person that can go there and reach those people. All Honduras will know of me is I was their Billy Graham. But I didn't know I was the next Billy Graham for Honduras. All I knew was I was sitting on a couch swearing my butt off to a bunch of people who loved me regardless of how messed up I was. Who are you going to bring out of this church? And who are you going to be after you have these real conversations in this church? Can I pray? Because I got to stop talking. Jesus, I love you. We love you. We know you love your church. We know you love your people. We know you love your leaders. God, all this is so pointless if it is not about you, if this is not for you, if this is not about growing your family and bringing the lost and the left out home to you. God, everything about church is so meaningless if we're not drawing those that are far away from you to come home to you. I know how much you love your children, so I know how important a church like this is. So God, I just pray your blessing, your breakthrough, your miracle, your provision to be on this church, on these people, on these families, on these leaders, and at the door of this church, God. Would you bring those people in? And God, would you inspire every single person in here? And would you anoint them with the leadership ability to grab a hold of those lost, those broken, those hurt, those traumatized people and shake them into a place of faith and hope and love and grace and fruitfulness. God, would you shake the foundations of your church to let us become what this world is dying for, so that we can be a Me Too church that draws in all people that you are dying to bring home. God, you are a God that celebrates the one and walks away from the 91 or 99. God, I just pray that this church that is so important, that has your heart, that is a Me Too church, would be blessed by you. God, I just pray breakthrough on each and every person in this room. I just pray that you open their eyes, you soften their hearts, you impart what they need so that they can become the leaders of tomorrow and leaders of today. We love you, God. We just give all that we are to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Do you want to do one more